Make sure you tell them to like it.
Like.
And subscribe.
And subscribe. Hit the button. It's easy. Do it now.
Please.
Welcome back to the Audrain Automobile Museum and our exhibition, Early Landmarks in Automotive Engineering. Once again, Alex Cull and I are taking a look at a more in-depth part of this exhibition with two cars that illustrate the variety of power in early cars. And the first car we're going to talk about, Alex, is this wonderful 1912 Roush & Lang electric roadster. Now, of course, many people today think, oh, electric cars are a new thing. Aha, not so much.
It's remarkable to think that a car like this that had a range of 30 or so miles, top speed at 20-ish miles an hour, existed 110 years ago. Because like you said, there are some people who think the electric car was invented in the last 10, 15, 20 years. But no, they've been around for a long time, and they even outperformed early gas and steam cars.
Exactly. It was a very funny thing. We often talk about the fact that the dominant form of propulsion had not yet been decided before World War I. And electric cars and steam cars were very much in the mix. Steam for their incredible effortless power and speed, and electric cars for their convenience and cleanliness. And electric cars were also one of the things that really did more than anything else to get women behind the wheel.
Sure.
As we mentioned in our exhibition here at the museum, Women Take the Wheel, Fashion, Modernity, and the Automobile, you can also see how the effect of women on cars would also translate into design, which we'll talk about a little bit later in this show as well, but also in the fact that the automobile really liberated women in terms of the fashions. The fashions of the 1880s you could not wear to ride in an automobile, certainly much less than operate one. And the electric car was perfect for the female driver because you didn't have the noise, the oil, the smell, and also, of course, the difficulty of starting. Crank starting could be hazardous if you didn't set the spark in advance exactly right before you attempted to do it. And you talk about, 1912, this electric car. 1912 is both the height of the electric car and the beginning of the end for the electric car, because in 1912, Mr. Kettering offered Cadillac a self-starter.
That spelled the end, or the beginning of the end, for the electric car. But it's always fun to look at these old advertisements and see the color and how they're marketed towards women, or the luxurious woman at the time. This was a very expensive car, one of the most expensive cars on the market you could buy. But Roush & Lang, they started as carriage builders, very expensive carriage builders. They transitioned to expensive electric cars. They were very finely made. And I think eventually when they got bought, they moved to Chicopee Falls, Mass.
They merged with Baker Electric.
That's what it was, yeah.
And that's another great part of the story as well, because this particular car was delivered new to the mother of Briggs Cunningham, the great yachtsman and automobile racer and race car builder, and certainly someone born to the manor. And so it's not surprising that a car like this, driven by his mother, would also have been very, very common here in Newport along Bellevue Avenue, going from cottage to cottage. And you mentioned also here that the technology involved with the electric car, and specifically enhancing its smoothness, also is something which makes this car very interesting, because Roush & Lang offered two different types of drivetrain.
Sure.
Chain and also bevel drive, shaft bevel drive.
The worm drive.
Worm drive, which got them into trouble with Baker, because Baker said, no, we invented this, we have a patent for this, and we're going to sue you. By the time the suit came to court, the companies realized there wasn't a big enough electric market for them to be fighting, and they had merged at that point. But it's also a fascinating thing. The Audrain entered this car in the 2022 Pebble Beach Concours d'Elegance, where it won third in class for unorthodox propulsion. And I had a chance to drive this car in the Pebble Beach tour, and it was absolutely wonderful driving through the Del Monte forest in this silent conveyance. It was just absolutely wonderful. And of course, I've driven it here in Newport, which can be seen on the Audrain Museum Network in the video. And again, the idea in 1912 of wafting silently down the street, when just a few years before you would have been behind a team of horses with the noise and the extra gifts that horses leave as they do their march down the street. And to transition to this, again, must have been absolutely amazing. And speaking of the tempo of invention. Electric cars not only, of course, came along at the turn of the century along with steam and internal combustion cars, but also the first hybrid car, the Lohner Porsche, 1902. So there is this whole idea that everything new is maybe old.
I would love to know where we would be if we had continued the level of production and resources put into gasoline cars if we put them into electric cars. It'd be fascinating to see where battery technology and electric everything would be.
Well, this also brings me, the reason why you're here, of course, at the Audrain Museum, Alex, and in this video, is because you provide effortless segues. And you've just done it in a brilliant way, because the big thing that happened was World War I. And we'll see the effect on technology in World War I and how that directly impacts cars with the next car we'll see, which is very different from a silent cruising electric roadster. Silent and cruising, electric, not at all.
Nope.
Take a look at this Packard.
All right.
From 1912 to 1916, we go from that wonderful electric car, and now you remember in the last video we did together, we went from that single-cylinder Benz and Oldsmobile to the four-cylinder American underslung. Now here we are in 1916, the Packard Twin 6, 12 silky smooth, powerful cylinders. This is an amazing car, an amazing achievement, thinking about this in 1916. And this, of course, is also the engine which legendarily inspired Enzo Ferrari to become an addict of the 12-cylinder engine. The idea that you have these little cylinders with much lighter weight, a block that weighs less because, frankly, it's got more holes in it, and power that is so smooth and delivered from low down to the higher end. Now, of course, in 1916, the high end is about 2,500, 3,000 RPM, so it's not really high. But this is an extraordinary car, an extraordinary achievement, thinking about where this is in the history of the automobile. This car in the Audrain collections was shown at the 2021 Pebble Beach Concours d'Elegance, and it won second in its class in antique cars. I drove this car on the 50 miles of the Pebble Beach tour, from Pebble Beach down to Big Sur and back, and it was amazing. And again, thinking about this kind of motoring power and pleasure and capability in this time, at the time of World War I, is astonishing. And it's also something that we were just talking about. You mentioned, gee, what could have been if we'd continued to develop electric and hybrid technology as we did the internal combustion engine? And the big answer to that is World War I. This Packard 12 was inspired by the engines built for the airplanes of World War I, the first air war. And the idea of building very powerful engines, which also didn't weigh very much so that they could be in these airplanes and used in these airplanes, was something that was immediately transferred into road-going cars. And we are certainly, World War I was a tragic event, but we certainly benefited with what was developed from these engines and their use here on the road.
When I heard that the 12-cylinder in this car weighed less than the 6-cylinder previous to it, I didn't believe it. I had to go double check right away. But it started to make more sense when you find out it's made of all aluminum, and the pistons are aluminum, and like you said, it just has more holes in it, so there's less of it. The interesting thing about the motor to me is that the 12-cylinder is not all about power. It's about the smoothness. It's a big motor working easy instead of a small motor working hard. And that's what gives this car that patented, easy driving, smooth feel.
Which became the absolute hallmark of the Packard brand. Mm-hmm. It was all about smoothness. In fact, for the Packard models made in the 1930s, it's quite common that the cars will be running and people will not realize it until you actually see a fan turning. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that also is remarkable about the progress in this, we don't have in this exhibition one of the early Packards which are in the Audrain collection, but we have a couple of early Packards, a 1901 and a 1903. And when you think about the fact that, again, for the Packard Motor Company, they went from single-cylinder and twin-cylinder cars in 1901 and 1902 to a 12-cylinder, the Twin 6. I mean, the absolute king of the hill of technological achievement.
Well, a quick story about the beginning of Packard is, I think, speaks to the innovation of all these cars. Is, Mr. Packard bought a Winton, wasn't satisfied, brought up his grievances, and went and said, "Go make your own car," much like the Ferrari and Lamborghini story. And he did just that. And I think like the stubbornness and the stick-to-itiveness of the people of the day to say, if I can't buy something that I like, I'm gonna make it. And we got some wonderful cars because of it.
So this is just, again, the tip of the iceberg in what this exhibition has to offer. We'll find in our next videos another leap forward, which will bring an even more remarkable development in the history of the automobile. Come back and join us here on the Audrain Museum Network and catch that video as well.